I wish to welcome everybody here, those who just arrived and those who have been since the morning or earlier. I'm pleased to open the last session for today, which the title of which is The Islamic Republic, Politics and Regional Trends. We have three distinguished lecturers today. They are all more or less concerned with the modern, contemporary politics of Iran, although have done some work on earlier periods as well, earlier than contemporary. I mean, still in the borders of modern Iran. The first speaker is Professor Farhad Kazemi from the New York University. He has contributed very interesting and important studies, especially to the study of urban poor in the revolution, in the Islamic revolution, and the peace and revolution in the Middle East. He has contributed many articles on various topics. Just out of my memory just now, I remember, for example, from Babi history to military and society in Iran, and different other topics. And his title of his speech today is Being a Citizen in the Islamic Republic. The floor is yours. I'm sorry, we are a little bit short in time, so that's why I'm a little bit hasting things.
Thank you very much. The first time I was invited to come to Israel by an Israeli colleague was Itamar Rabinovich, and since then 6 or 7 times my host has been Menashri, and I'm delighted to be back here among friends. It's a pleasure to be here yet once again. I'm going to talk about 3 related themes, where first is the concept of citizenship, one of the most central concepts in modern society and culture and politics. Then about the problematique of citizenship and Islam, and then go into, for illustration purposes, the issue within the Islamic Republic of Iran. Citizenship essentially concerns access to various rights and powers. Its critical assumption is the quest for equality in the social order. As T.H. Marshall, scholar who wrote a classic treatment of the subject, states, citizenship has 3 basic components: civil, political, and social. Civil citizenship is quest for individual rights. Political citizenship is quest for access to the decision-making process and institutions and laws. And social citizenship, in his view, is quest for educational and economic attainment. Marshall conceived liberalism as a succession of citizenship rights from the legal and political realm to the social realm. Citizenship cannot be properly understood in the modern age without exercise of suffrage, equality before the law, and what one might call equality of political power. The notion of citizenship in the Islamic world is important for several reasons. First of all, because the concept is new to Islam and is essentially borrowed from the West in the past century. Prior to the 19th century, the relevant concerns in the Islamic political theory were individual and groups' rights, duties, and obligations, as these were codified in Islamic law. Specific rights of citizens, individual citizens, and the necessity of their protection by the state were not, in Islam, the dominant concern. To this day, both the Islamic world and the larger Third World grapple with the inherent tensions between citizen rights before the state and their duties and obligations to the state. This tension is evident in a wide spectrum of writing, both by Muslims and non-Muslims in the Third World. Secondly, the discussion of this topic also concerns organization. Whether it's inchoate or organized, that is fundamental to politics. If you want to get rights, you need to organize. So this gets into the process of politics much more intimately. Thirdly, by dealing with this topic, one also deals with some critical institutions of Islam. For example, the judiciary, which is an institution that has been horrible in the case of Iran, for example, its role in promotion and denial of the rights of citizens. To quote a major scholar, Donald Horowitz, who's both a legal scholar and anthropologist on this issue, he raises three key points about citizenship. One is, who is a citizen? Two, among citizens, who has what privileges? Three, whose norms and practices are symbolically aligned with the state? To put this differently, in Islam, as in most other civilizations, the question of society's relationship to the state is central. State is essential. State needs to protect rights and duties and so forth, but also the state is the one that would allow for the operation of individual or collective rights. Political authority, then, is important to the welfare of the religious community, and it is to be respected. By the same token, a believing Muslim citizen is expected to be an activist for the faith and involved in civic matters. Mutual need and dependency of state and society is eminently recognized in Islam. Islam, as was said this morning as well correctly, is in many respects a highly communitarian religion. Although individual rights are recognized and the sanctity of private property acknowledged, the thrust of Islamic civilization has been essentially on group emphasis, not individual rights. Society Islam is always categorized in one group or the other. You all know the major dominant categorization, the abode of war and the abode of peace, and then subcategorization in the abode of war. This pattern of categorization of people with different some other religion and potentially in danger of capital punishments. As we do also know, there are certain groups among the Muslims, various groups of Islamists, who deny citizenship rights to others in society, including Muslims. Now, within the Islamic citizenship rights, there are some groups that are privileged. For example, even though Islam claims, similar to Protestantism, the priesthood of all believers, the clerics have come to have a privileged situation. More so in Shia Islam, as the privilege of the clerics, due to many, many reasons, is institutionalized. And also, there's a special taxation that benefits them and others. So, in Islam, the overriding concern is group identity within the community. And this provides, at least potentially and theoretically, a sense of solidarity and a sense of togetherness, at least in times of trouble. Looking at certain Islamist groups, the important designation here is the notion of exclusion and inclusion, a central concept in citizenship. There are some Muslim groups who deny citizenship rights to non-Muslim categories. There are certain Islamic groups in the Muslim world who also make explicit denunciation of those Muslims who do not accept certain precepts of Islam and exclude them. I'm sure in this crowd, all of you have read Gilles Kepel's famous book on the Prophet and the Pharaoh, where he talks about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the four major groups in Egypt that are by definition the excluded groups: the Jewry, the Crusade, communism, and secularism. And of course, in terms of Jewry, that those groups make no distinction between Zionism and Judaism, and by Crusade, they're referring to the Copts of Egypt. And clearly, neither communism nor secularism would be accepted in that kind of Islamic frame of mind. Now, with your permission, let me go more specifically and discuss something about this problem within Iran. The theocratic Shia Islamic State, which was created by Ayatollah Khomeini, reasserts the unity of God, and the Constitution itself states that the Islamic Republic is a system of government based on belief in one God, his exclusive possession of sovereignty, and his right to legislate, and furthermore, the necessity of submission to his command. It further posits a critical role for the clerics as leaders of the community and the polity until the return of the Mahdi, the 12th Shi'i Imam. In many respects, Khomeini tried to recreate the Shi'i version of the Calvinist Geneva. The comparison here, in some ways, is truly astounding. It is very true, as I have said and many of my colleagues have said, that there are many highly non-fundamentalist features in the Constitution of the Islamic Republic and even in the institutions and actions of the Islamic government. However, the fact remains that the essential conception of the Islamic Republic of Iran is religiously inspired. In Khomeini's own words, in his last will and testament, as follows: "The secret of both the revolution and the continuation of the Islamic Republic are following two essential foundations. Divine motivation, and part of the same part, and the high ideal of establishing the Islamic governments on the one hand, and the unity of all people with one voice on the other." In such a system, as defined by Khomeini, not always practiced in that form, divine criteria determine membership in the community and act as standards for evaluating and judging all forms of social behavior. The accepted members of the community, the full citizens, are then asked to engage in modern-day acting out of the classic Islamic injunction of command the good and forbid the evil. Everyone, if is to be a citizen, is expected to be an active lieutenant of the state in order to ensure that all religious norms and moral obligations are adhered to. An individual remains a citizen of the community and in good standing as long as the fundamental precepts of the Islamic government are accepted. In other words, based on the documents of the Islamic Republic, citizenship is a conditional entitlement. This is not all that dramatically different from other places, but is much more forceful in this particular case. And the community, rather than the individual, is the one that passes judgments on such a view. Such a conception, if followed fully and completely, allows, at least potentially, for intermittent or regular violation of individual rights when the needs of the community are viewed to be paramount. This particular situation becomes more problematic when applied to religious minorities. By definition, any religious minority is disadvantaged in a society where a particular type of religion is dominant and forcefully applied. In some ways, the Islamic Republic, through its guarantee of representation, allows Zoroastrians, Jews, and Christians to be citizens of the community, of the country, even though they may be second-class citizens in many respects. This adheres and conforms fully to, of course, the classical Islamic pattern in this regard of the people of the book, and as we know, the Zoroastrians were also included in this as part of a kind of a bargain that took place at a certain time. There are certain problems with this situation. One is the Article 26 of the Constitution, which even though allows religious observance within these three recognized communities, it can intervene and interfere when, according to the state, that these people have transgressed the boundaries and have done something to affect the viability of the Islamic State and Islamic government. This is one problem. The second problem, much more serious, is the designation of what group is a religious community. And this, of course, as has been mentioned before, applies to the Baha'is of Iran. You all know this, but very briefly, which view Iran as a holy land. It's a religion that began 19th century Iran. It has a very significant precept, which is progressive revelation. At every age, there's a new prophet and a new message. This goes fundamentally with the basic precept of Islam that believes in finality of the Prophet, Muhammad, and the finality of his message. So the Baha'is have been excluded as citizens in the Iranian society. That even applies to the religiously tolerant Shah of Iran, which at a certain times, even he gave in. I think this wonderful presentation the hour before, somebody mentioned the name of Falsafi. This preacher Falsafi, his sins are many, but one of his most significant actions against the community was against the Baha'is in the mid-50s, 55, behind the pulpit. Eventually, the Baha'i house of worship was attacked by thugs because it had the shape of a mosque dome and was forced to go into different kind of a shape and so forth. And of course, in the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Baha'is are systematically and institutionally discriminated and not recognized as citizens. We have followed the press days. Most recently, past few days, there has been another systematic attack on the Baha'i citizen, which form probably 300,000 people in Iran, which is the largest non-Islamic religious minority in that country. Now, a central concept in discussion of citizenship is the idea of civility as we use it in political theory, which is defined briefly as tolerance of the other. This notion of civility is a problematic feature of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Tolerance is formally denied to one significant religious group and is constrained in its application to the three other religious minorities. Furthermore, it is also denied to those who espouse secularism in society and those who have similar views of the separation of the church and state. This does not mean that the Iranian society as a whole is non-civil. In fact, tolerance is an important feature of Iranian society at large. I'm talking now about formal governmental elements in this regard. There is no need for me to talk about another category, which is the women, as we had this two very fine presentation the hour before. But the place and role of women, Iranian women, as another disadvantaged group is also a significant problem of how citizenship is applied in Iran. On one level, of course, women are extolled as carriers of virtue, as significant actors in society, and so forth and so on. But on another level, there is a set of laws and regulation that put them at a very important disadvantage. So they have not gained the full citizenship rights. The real problem here is the religious conception of the Islamic Republic and the Shia versions of that. That is what becomes barriers, but are not barriers that cannot be crossed. David Menashri asked me to be brief and quick, so I'm skipping several pages. Let me go to my conclusion. The relationship between Islam and citizenship is highly complex and problematic. Although there are clearly evolutionary and positive trends in Islam and in the Islamic Republic in this regard, and there has been acceptance of some elements of this concept from the West, much of the term's meaning and application is drawn from traditional Islamic heritage. All that said, there is no necessary reason not to believe that a more modern and positivistic view of citizenship cannot emerge within Islamic jurisprudence, especially Shia jurisprudence. Whatever problems that Shia jurisprudence has, it is dynamic. And in fact, in terms of modernity, as a theoretical concept, it's probably a step ahead of the modernism in the Sunni tradition. I think, since I'm an optimist by nature, maybe wrongly, we should have optimism that Islamic polities, especially the Islamic Republic of Iran, can and may emerge in such a form that they would espouse full and equal citizenship for all, And that majority-minority problem is not constituted on the basis of incidental factors, such as race, religion, or gender, I would say, inshallah.
Thank you, Professor Kazemi, for a very interesting presentation. Given the hurried schedule, I would move very fastly to the next speaker. Professor Bernard Hourcade is a scholar and research fellow at the Centre National de Recherche Scientifique in France. He wrote books and many articles on the urban geography of Iran. His most recent book is The Atlas of Tehran, forwarded by the ex-mayor of Tehran and the present president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Today's title of his presentation is The Political and Social Dynamics of Traditional Islam in Iran. Please.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to tell you that how happy I am to be here and to thank David Menashri, Meir Litvak, the University of Tel Aviv, for being here and to invite me to Israel and to give me the opportunity to share with you the experience I have about Iranian land and society. I would like to elaborate with you this afternoon on current political and social issues in Iran. As you know, everybody was thinking about the future of Iran, about the success of reformism, about the bright future of Iran. And Ahmadinejad came. And it was it was certainly a big surprise for everybody, and maybe the end of the dream of hope we had about the future of Iran. I think we can, yeah. I would like to elaborate on the new identities of traditional Islam. As a matter of fact, we have seen in last year that in Iran we have got a lot of people voting and supporting a sort of Islam which is very popular and which is not really modern. And I would like to elaborate on these words of modernity and tradition. Maybe tradition and modernity is no longer the way to discuss on Iran. First of all, I would like to show you this graph. We were discussing this morning, Dr. Borgetti told us about the previous political background of Islamic revolution. But let us see at these figures. You have the red arrow, the red line here is the literate population of Iran, the yellow one, the illiterate population. It crosses in September 78. The population living in cities, the population living in villages, crosses in February 79. One in the beginning revolution, the second one, the day Khomeini is arriving in Tehran. I don't mean that it is a mechanical effect, that on the very day there is a crossing of these lines, something will occur. But it occurred. The Islamic revolution came when the society of Iran was changing. And so, traditional modernity is not perhaps the problem, since the whole Iran was modern state. We are able to speak about traditional modernity in everywhere, in Israel, in France, in the US, and of course in Iran. But tradition and modernity was very important in the 19th century, when as a matter of fact, nothing was modern in Iran. So modernity was coming from outside. But now modernity is also coming from inside. Iranian citizens are making modernity their own modernity. So we have to think about the new situation. Especially, I do think that we have to have a much more sophisticated model about Iranian society. As a matter of fact, traditional modernity is no longer a way to decipher the Iranian society. Since, as you know, Islam was traditionally on the panel of tradition. But now, in Iran, they have got the most modern clerics in the world. In which country have you got clerics having ruled a country of 70 million inhabitants, going to UN in New York, being able to discuss nuclear issues, and having managed a country for 25 years. Even in the Buddhists, in Protestants, in Catholics, on any religion, you can find people having sharing such a modernity. So, we have, I think, to divide, in effect, in Iran, between three components. Islam, of course, which is the religion of 99% of the population of Iran, in which you have got modern people, traditional people. You have got, of course, Iran. Nationalism is very important, but you have traditional nationalism and much more modern and open-minded nationalism. And you have got, of course, internationalism, globalization. Since Iran is selling oil, Iran is linked with international society, of course. So currently, Iran, we have a diagram, starting from 0% of Islam to 100% and so on three sides of this graph. So Iran in the 90s was far from international activities and close to Islam and nationalism. In the 2000, Iran was a little bit more closer to nationalism and closer to international. At the end of Khatami, it was closer to international, far from Islam, and now back to closer to Islam. In any case, you have less than 10% of this identity. So, for instance, it's just as a joke or as an example. If we are having Islamic Republic in the 80s, the share of Islam was very high. Oh, it is 40%, or 50%. We have Iran, nationalism, for instance, 30%, and international 20%. Let us discuss about it. And if you want Ahmadinejad today, for instance, Ahmadinejad is maybe 60% Islamic, but for instance, 30%, there's 40% Islamic, 30% nationalist, and 30% international. Discussing about the nuclear issue, in my opinion, international problems are 50% of the problem, and maybe nationalism 30% and Islam 20%. So it's just a way to elaborate on Iranian issues. And a person you have, when you have somebody in front of you with a nice tie speaking French or English, and so this guy is 100% international, I can have a good deal with him, be cautious. If he's a businessman, you know that this guy, since he's allowed to speak with you, is allowed to do so because he has got an uncle Ayatollah, because nobody is able to have international business if you know clerical protection. So at least he has got 10% of Islam in his behavior, in his personality. And of course, he's Iranian, at least 10% of nationalism. And in the making of the debate, of the discussion, maybe the rate of Islam and nationalism can rise to 40%, only 20% of international. So we have to deal with the new identities of Iran, and not only with tradition and modernity. So let us discuss about what are the clerics today. Maybe Ahmadinejad is the first guy who has defeated the clerics. Of course, everybody knows that Islamic Republic was done by Khomeini, and so since that time, the clerics are managing the revolution. But it is not during the beginning of the revolution, the main issue was the Iran-Iraq war. Before Iran-Iraq war, the balance of power between all the forces who made the revolution was unclear. When the war occurred, of course, the rulers of Iran at that time, I mean the clerics and Imam Khomeini, were the rulers. So even the opponent had to obey him. That's obvious in any country in the world. So during the time when all the younger people, all the people we are speaking about this morning, were on the front fighting against Iraq and against the state and against Israel and against Europe and against everybody, the clerics were behind the front, managing the country, taking some money in the banks, and having a good time during 8 years, and being able to build a nice, strong, despotic state when there's a war, we're fighting on the front. And so Islamic Republic has been made by the clerics because of the war, in my opinion. So when these guys came back from the front, they were 30 years old, not old enough to share the power. What did they do? They went back to university and get a degree. Ahmadinejad and Yazwan did the same thing. And when they were 50 years old, they were old enough to take high top-level position, and for instance, being President of the Republic. So I think we have to discuss who are the clerics. Of course, Khomeini was the ruler, the manager of everything in the beginning. But afterwards, we have spoken about this morning, very interesting. Kadivar, for instance, is a new range of clerics. But who is listening to these people? The question was asked this morning. In my opinion, traditional Muslims are, of course, listening what Khomeini told. All clerics, all the Friday prayers everywhere, they have a strong power of the society on traditional Islam in Iran. And these newcomers, these new modern ayatollahs, of course in Tehran, among us, everywhere in the world, we are listening to the new Lasser and Calvin, who are renewing completely Islam in Iran. But when you have the time to put ballot in a box, how many people who have read Kadivar or Shabestari's books are able to put the right ballot in the box? How many people following Khomeini are able to put a ballot in the box, or instead of one ballot, 100 ballots instead of one, maybe? But so I don't think that the new clerics have really understood what a republic is. Of course, they have been to jail, and it is difficult for them to be everywhere in the country. But they remain intellectuals. And one of the main problems of Iran is to have on one side intellectuals, on the other side the society, and the link between both is very difficult. In any country it's the same thing, but especially maybe in Iran. So the traditional clerics following Khomeini are still important, the newcomers not enough. But the clerics are basically businessmen now. One of the main explanations, from my point of view, of the collapse of Hamid Rafsanjani during the last elections is that Rafsanjani, was the beginning, 20 years ago, he was a very political cleric. He had a network, a traditional cleric network, and able to bring people supporting Khomeini. And he was able to be elected President of the Republic 20 years, 15 years ago. But as you know, when the boys were fighting on the front, he was behind the front making money. Him and all his friends, all his family. So these people have given up their political Islamic traditional network for a business international network. But since Iran is a republic now, not a democracy, but a republic, you need to go through the ballots, through the elections. To be elected, you have to find at least 10 million people putting the right ballot in the box. So it is a technique you need. You need a network for that. And Rafsanjani has forgotten that. And he has a very negative image of what is the clerics, what are the clerics. So for the day being, when I am a traditional Muslim, a true believer in Iran, who I am following, Khomeini, a little bit, since he was a good man, strong man, and we do trust in him. I did trust in him. Rafsanjani, not at least. Anybody in this room would be candidate against Rafsanjani would be elected in Iran. That's clear. Not with 17 million ballots, but with 15 at least. Following Kadivar and Shabestari, they are intellectuals. They are living in Tehran. They have political problems. So I don't follow them. And maybe I shall follow Mr. Sistani or these mullahs in Najaf, all traditional ones. But it is no longer Islam and politics. So I think that the coming of Ahmadinejad is the beginning of a new era in Islamic Republic of Iran, an era where the clerics are no longer able to rule and to manage traditional Islam. It's just a starting point, of course. The main thing is that the Pasdaran came. Who was the Pasdaran? At the beginning, there were revolutionary people. Young people, 20, 80 years old. There was a revolution. They were leftists, more or less, nationalists, sold worldism. They want Iran to be an independent country, far from the US, and so on and so on. We know it very well. The war occurred. Immediately they went to the front. And during 8 years, they were fighting on the front. So most of them are soldiers, devoted to their country, to Islam, of course, since they are Muslims, but first of their country. As they want Iran to be a modern country. They were students, most of them. So they are, in their personality, at least 40% of international, 40% of Islam, of 30% of Islam, and maybe 20% of nationalism. And nationalism maybe grow bigger, but as a whole, they had 1/3 in each part. 1/3 nationalism, 1/3 international, 1/3 Islamic. And these guys were fighting during 8 years. Coming back from the front, as you know, they were defeated, they had no position in the administration of Iran. And what happened? All these guys I had told you before, they have been given the opportunity to go to university without any concours. Others who began university able, they have a fellowship to go on studying. So after some years, they are all doctors, engineers. The level of scientific level is not so high, but it doesn't matter. If you are a doctor, engineer in Iran, that's enough. So they are doctors, like Ahmadinejad was the other one. Some of them, the best of them, had the opportunity to go in Australia, in Canada, basically, since they cannot go to the US, to be trained in English, to be able to see what international world is. When the 1990s are beginning, in 91, 92, 93, these guys were coming back from Australia, from France, Germany, and Canada. They were 45 years old and having high-ranking position in Iran. During that time, they were, of course, in some position, but they were not involved in politics, not so much. And these guys, who had a foreign, international experience, we were fighting on the front. These guys are not the followers of Mr. Ahmadinejad. These were the soldiers of Iran-Iraq war. Ahmadinejad was another group of Pasdaran. He was the Pasdaran fighting the interior enemy, filling up Evin's jail with opponents, leftists. He was in the intelligence service in Iran, in the Salman Etellaat. And all these guys who have been passed around for 1 or 2 years, no more. Even not a single day on the front. These guys were, of course, during that time, members of Pasdaran, but involved in Ministry of Interior as Ostandaran, as Farmandaran, as people working in intelligence services everywhere. So during that time, they were working inside Iran with their family, having all the advantages of everything, but using the word of Pasdaran, of fighters. And so these two tribes of Pasdaran are completely different. A new friend of mine, he was a high-ranking level during the war. He was colonel and now general in the Pasdaran, retired. He told me, he was asked by Ahmadinejad to work in as municipality of Tehran since he's working in urbanism. He told me, I met Ahmadinejad when he was elected mayor of Tehran. He knew me, but I did not know him. And what did he do, I asked. He told me I didn't want to work with him. Why? You know, we can have dinner with the devil. We need a long spoon. But I don't have a spoon long enough to eat with Mr. Ahmadinejad. And he is a Pasdar, general of Pasdar, very influent man, and a close baradar, a brother, of course. When he's speaking with Ahmadinejad, they are brothers, of course, since they are passed around all of them. But completely different tribes. As among the clerics, you had a division between Maternuri and Ratami. When the Pasdar are now arriving into power, the new generation of people who have got the experience of the war, not the experience of revolution. They didn't do the revolution. They were the supporters of revolution. But they were 20 years old at that time. So they didn't make the revolution, but they made the war. So the experience is completely different. And so these guys, you have got a range of policy, of political difference between them from right to left. Exactly in France, for instance, after the war, 100% of the political personnel were, of course, coming from the resistance against the German in the war. Now it's obvious that 90% of the people in the government are coming from the Iran-Iraq war. All were passed around. It's not a problem, but which passed around were they? That's a problem. And among the passed around, the last topic is the Basiji. The Basiji, who are, of course, in the hands of Mr. Ahmadinejad, not in the hands of this war. And so when you have a ballot, when you have elections, it is very useful to have some people putting 100 ballots instead of one in the box to be elected. And Mr. Ahmadinejad was able to do so. I would like to say one word about Ashura disease, or in fact, Ashura syndrome. In Iran, all these people have been educated in the framework of Ashura, of being defeated, of the death of Imam Hussein. And so I think we were speaking this morning about the fact that everything is coming from outside against poor people of Iran. You know, the Greeks have come, and the Turks have come, the Mongols have come, the Arabs have come, the Americans have come, the British have come, and Khomeini came. And the poor people of Iran is all the time defeated by people coming from outside, and the poor good guys in Iran are always the time defeated. So they are crying all the time. It's Ashura disease. And so they are defeated. And I was speaking about Ashura with my friend, Pastor Ron. He told me, no, I don't accept your opinion. You know, Imam Hussein is dead one day, is the day of Ashura. And this day I'm very sorry, because Imam Hussein was died this day. And I am really sorry that day. But 364 days in the year, I am a fighter. So I fight, I am living, I'm working all the year, and one day in the year I am crying and very sad because of the death of Imam Hussein. But this young generation is not strong enough, and Iranians are still ill with this Ashura disease, and maybe Mr. Ahmadinejad is. So traditional popular clerical Islam is still important in Iran. You have got people going to the mosque, that's a matter of fact. You have got in Iran the Sadegh, you know, the foundation where people are giving money for welfare. It exists in Iran. People are going to Hajj, they are going to Mashhad. And so in Iran, even in some places, people are against Islam. They are fed up with Islam, fed up with political Islam. But basically, even people are still believers. Because in Iran, it's not only Shemron and Tehran. And if you go in other places in Iran, especially when you go to Mashhad, you understand that Iran is not Tehran. The center of Iran is Mashhad. You know who is Mr. Khamenei? Somebody told me he's a guide of the Islamic Republic. No, he is representative of Mr. Tabasi in the state of Iran. The head of Iran is Mr. Tabasi, the only guy, only cleric, appointed by Khomeini, still in power. Maybe because Khomeini was appointed by him, I don't know exactly. But as a matter of fact, money is coming from there. It is the most important business company in Iran, one of the biggest in the world. And they have got a strong influence, conservative influence, everywhere in Iran. We have to think about it, about all the boneyard, all the wharf, all the traditional institutions who have still got a lot of power in Iran. Imam Reza is above everything. And in Iran, people are still believers of Imam Reza. So let's have just a look of Ahmadinejad's victory. Is it a symbol of a new, rooted and sustainable political Islam in Iran? In my opinion, political Islam in Iran is rooted. It means that the clerics now are modern clerics. They are able to, even if the Shah is coming tomorrow morning, 20% of the population of Iran is traditional Islam, following Mr. Ahmadinejad or somebody else like him. It will be 15%, 23%, more or less 20% of the population. In France, we have got the right wing of Mr. Le Pen is between 80 and 25% every year. So, but Iran France is a republic, more or less. So, let's have a look at this mapping. I've been mapping Iran, you know, geographer and making maps. So, I made a map of the number of votes Ahmadinejad has got at the first round, but with a special technique mapping, I made this map, which shows the centrality of votes. We can see that Tehran is not the central place for Ahmadinejad. The central place is Esfahan, Yazd, who are supporter of Khatami before, Khomeini here, Rome, of course, and Esfahan. And some people here in Birjand. We can see that around Iran, the Turkish-speaking population, the Kurdish one, the Lori one, the Arabs, the Baluch, people in Mashhad, in Saras, and in Bojnur, the Kurds and the Turkmen here, they don't so much like him, even like the Rashkai and the Bakhtiari. So who are these people there? The geographical analysis shows that the supporters of Ahmadinejad are not the whole country of Iran. I try, through statistics, to combine who are these people. Are they the most Muslim, the most well-off, the most educated? I didn't find until now the real link. I would like to have the number of the Shahid. How many people have been killed during the war? maybe there is a correlation between the vote for Ahmadinejad and the vote and the number of people killed during the war. Because on the beginning of the revolution, when the revolution started, they needed people, true believers, Shiite people, Persian-speaking people, if possible, in the network of traditional Islam. Where was it? In Isfahan, in Kashan, on central Iran. There were the places where the clerics were strong. So the first soldiers of the revolution came from there. Maybe an opinion. I'm not sure at all about it. And so the network of the former Pasdaran and the network of the Basiji are still there. So when you need people putting 100 ballots instead of one in a place in Iran where you can find this guy, here you can find them. Not in Tabriz, not in some other places. You have to see who are these guys. It is not by chance that they are living in such a place. The centrality is too heavy. We are looking at the second round. Of course, you see that even the Turks here are voting for Ahmadinejad, but the people in Isfahan were voting less for him, and people of Yazd, the same thing. So, and he had a good representative here in Bandar Abbas and in Benjad. So, we have to study that. And it is not by chance that Ahmadinejad was successful. So, if let us have a look at the maps of other candidates. We can see Meir Alizadeh, for instance, is a very ethnic result. You can see here Radibov, of course, born in Mashhad, so he has got a lot of people voting for him in Mashhad. Karoubi is for Lorestan, and the people of southern Iran voted for him. And Mohin is the one who has got votes coming from the Sunni, especially in Iran. So we have to study about it and to discuss what is, after 70 years of experience of ruling major states, Islam has been deeply transformed in Iran. There is a new, modern, traditional Islam. We have to deal not with modern, traditional. Islam is something else in Iran. And we have got, of course, what is Mrs. Shirin Ebadi thinking about Islam. We have got, of course, modern Islam of Kadivar and Shabestari. We have got, of course, the modern national Islam of the Pasdaran fighting on the front. We have got the traditional Islam of the people going to Hajj and to Makkah. We have got also the business Islam, which is most important, Mr. Rafsanjani and all the other one. You have got Mr. Ahmadinejad Islam in Iran. And you have got traditional Islam, people who are going to the mosque twice a year and no more. So we have to think about this modern Islam, which is rooted in the country and very sophisticated. No longer possible to speak about traditional modernity here, but to think with a much more sophisticated model, including Iran, Islam, international, and these three pillars, these three components of of Iranian contemporary identity is not enough. Of course, with thousands of components. But let us try with these three, for the beginning, having both, each of them, tradition and modernity. It will be the beginning, maybe, of thinking different what is Islam today. Just to show you, the conclusion I had, the conclusion of the conclusion, where I am here, here. I've made a map of Tehran recently, and to see who are the people who is traditional in Islam. It is a map, you have published it in the Atlas of Tehran Metropolis, it is on the website, and I thank very much Mr. Ahmadinejad, Mayor of Tehran, of giving me the opportunity to publish such a book. Thank you, Mr. President. Showing the lower classes in Tehran. And you can see that in Tehran, the north and south position doesn't exist anymore. And so the dangerous classes, the traditional Islam in Iran now is in southeast, southwest, and northeast of Tehran. And new places are emerging from Iran today when looking in detail. So we have to be on the field and to see who are these people who are voting for Ahmadinejad. The answer is not very clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Hourcade, for illuminating speech.
Thank you.
And last but not the least, of course, is Professor David Menashri, who is, of course, to the Israeli public and the international public very well known. Recently head of the newly inaugurated Center for Iranian Studies at Tel Aviv University for 2-3 decades, I believe. The leading scholar, still the leading as but before he was actually the person who tutored so many students who became now either possessor of PhDs or on the road to the PhDs and MAs. And he's path-breaking through in this field of modern Iranian history. His publications are numerous, but the most important of which are, of course, his PhD turned into book about education and the modernization of Iran, and more recent one, the post-revolutionary politics in Iran. He is, of course, composer of the Iran section in the Middle East Contemporary Survey for almost from its inception. And today his title of his talk is Ahmadinejad and Iran's Neocons, A New Hope for the Revolution. Please. Question mark.
Question mark, yeah.
Thank you. And there is a question mark at the end of this title. This is a new hope. Before going into it, some time ago, a few years ago, a colleague of mine from another university approached me and said with some pride that you know, the university is ready. I've just retired. The university is running after me every day, asking me to give a seminar because there is no one after me who can give a seminar on Iran. I told him instantly, you know, that it will not happen to me. Today, when I heard two of our graduate students here speaking, Ori and Liora, I'm sure you will agree with me that it's not going to happen to me because there are really with such graduate students and many of them in this here, and he was also one day graduate student and now in position in Haifa University. I think that it's really fascinating to see the progressive interest in Iranian studies here in Israel. Now, I asked Farhad, Professor Kazemi is right, I asked him to speak brief because I know he can deliver complex ideas in very, short way. I wish I had the same qualities, but I decided to speak shorter than him, so he will forgive me. And I put aside my notes because I want to say a few words that really were raised here. Today was, for me, listening to the lectures, a very, important, interesting, and educating kind of experience to learn more how complex this phenomenon that we call modern Iran is. And we're listening to lectures about ideologies and political system, and then the roots of the revolution, the aftermath of the revolution. Everything you touch, nothing is clear. Everything is complex, and everything that you think you know that you know less. And it's not enough to know that Ahmadinejad is radical, and which tribe he comes from, and then what family in the tribe you are really related to. And these are all important and interesting, and I think that we heard this morning from Professor Boroujerdi, basically the same thing from pre-revolutionary era. And now I'm hesitant even to speak about traditionalism and Islamism, because Professor Hourcade warned us how difficult it is, and it's different types of Islam. And while he was speaking, I thought in terms of one of his colleagues in Paris, the collapse, what is the name, of political Islam, Olivier Roy. What is the title? The failure of political Islam. And then you saved Islam somehow, Bernard, and it's not failure of political Islam, but it's one type of Islam. There is another one which is very strong with roots in society. So if I'm confused, I'm really concerned about my students. So it makes us really to work harder to understand better. And then about Iranian Is Iran powerful? It's so strong. If you follow Ahmadinejad's statements and you see Iran performance in the region, Iran is, at least we can see Iran appearing as a major country in the Middle East, and it's strong, and certainly it's much more important than many of the Arab countries in the Middle East. And as you think about the powers in the Middle East, there are not anymore Arab Middle East, and no, the Arab are not dominant politically, militarily. If there are three powers in the Middle East, none of them is Arab. Turkey, Iran, Israel, and but when you look domestically into the issues that some of the people here are more familiar than I am, about the social, political situation of the people, freedom or social situation, economic situation. So Iran is very rich. Any additional dollar that adds to the barrel of oil adds almost $1 billion additional annual income for Iran. So Iran is a rich country. The people are not that rich. So another, I think, paradox in the life of the Iranians. And what about hope? I think the whole Islamic revolution is about giving hope to people. Khomeini emerged not with promising anything. He was smart enough not to promise any actual improvement in this world. He made many promises for the world to come. When it's safe, it's wonderful. I hope many other leaders will learn that when you make promises for 5 years, 5 years will pass. The Shah said for many years that in 5 years Iran will be one of the richest and most strongest countries in the world. It will be Switzerland of the Middle East, or Switzerland or whatever country of the Middle East. It did not become so. It did not come so. But Khomeini gave hope. In my view, that was one of the reasons that people supported him. And then there was another hope. 8 years ago, Khatami brought a new hope, which is totally different hope. With the stress was different. Khomeini's major aim, I believe, was the whole thing is about justice. What is justice about? For Khomeini, I think the main issue in justice is social, economic justice. For Khatami, it was political openness, and political justice was the main thing. So Iran moved from Khomeini through Rafsanjani to Khatami and now to Ahmadinejad. Goes back to the early days of the revolution. His hope is the hope of Ayatollah Khomeini. He somehow claims that he has the remedy to the malaise of the Iranian or Muslim society. But before we go into there is a hope, the question is, what was the revolution about? And this issue has been raised here and there. Professor Bakhash spoke about it in a way, and others, and also Professor Burujardi this morning. It's been very difficult to convince me the whole revolution was about a return to Islam. Even when they're taping it, I can say that if I'd lived in Iran the last 2 years of the Shah's rule, had I been Iranian citizen in 1978, chances are that I would have supported Ayatollah Khomeini. Life was miserable. People were looking for hope. Khomeini provided them with hope, or maybe illusion, that he would bring them to the promised land. I don't mean here, but to bring them to success, to achievement. So it's so you have to go into the educational system, housing, and really what was the moving people. It is true that if the aftermath of the Islamic revolution, there is an Islamic regime. I think that this is not what motivated people in the first place. They went there, and we learned this morning that in the revolution there were Marxists, Mujahideen Khalq, liberal intellectuals, Islamists, and all kinds of different ideologies. The revolution has been, someone said, intercepted by the clerics, and actually Khomeini, who was a leading force in the revolution, actually established an Islamic regime. And then following the Islamic regime, what is the meaning of Islamic regime? And we spoke about it this morning. There are different interpretations of Islam. Again, Soroush was mentioned here, but Soroush is not the only one. This is the main issue in Iran today. What is the real meaning of Islam? There was a fascinating article some years ago in Jami'ah, a newspaper that has been shut down since. And Ayatollah wrote an article asking the young people, the young students, to obey true Islam and not to cross certain red lines. A young student replied back in the title. I like the title of of the article say, Pedar Jameh Javanas. Father, the society is young, and Jameh is also the name of the newspaper. And in his article, the student asks, his beginning was even nicer. He said, I don't know why people that get old forget their youth. It goes for many of us, not the young people here. And then he asked, you tell us to obey true Islam, but who is to tell us what is true Islam and how many Islams are there? His conclusion was at the end of the article that the problem is not that we, the young people, are crossing certain unidentified red lines. The problem is that you, the old guards, the conservative ulama, you are in a one-way street. You are driving against the flow of traffic. And I think it's the society that Professor Kazemi was speaking is going one way, and the ruling institutions going different way. And I'm not the geographer, so I don't have when they cross each other, but certainly they are parallel in Iran. So life in Iran is not what actually is being seen from the screens of television. The best way to illustrate this is a story that I heard from one of the Iranian professors in a conference that I met him some time ago. He told me that story to show that Iran is not actually what one can see from outside. He told me that someone who has not been in Iran for a long time comes back to Iran to visit and asks his friend where I can buy cigarettes here. Say, we want cigarettes in the mosque. Say, the mosque is a place for cigarettes, the mosque is a place for prayer. Say, well, you want a place for prayer, you should go to Tehran University. Say, well, Tehran University is not a place for prayer, the university is a place for the intellectuals. Say, oh, place of the intellectuals. You were looking for intellectuals, go to Evin jail. And then say, well, but the jail is for corrupt and criminal people. Say, well, corrupt and criminal people are, you know where they are located these days. So it's not really what you see is what is really is. Well, so on one side we see openness in Iran. Even as an Israeli, when I usually speak about it, some officials have already told me how they're speaking about openness and relative freedom in Iran. In the last 5 years, 100 newspapers were shut down. My answer is, show me another country in the Middle East which has 100 liberal newspapers that we can go and shut them down. It depends which half of the glass you wish to look at. And there are signs, and you look at book publications, Akbar Ganji, Kadivar, Soroush, and others. It's true that many of them went to jail. I think Bakhash mentioned Abdallah Nouri. Abdallah Nouri in court. He said that, well, he was blamed, among others, to have moderate views about Israel or accepting Israel. So I don't accept Israel, but it exists. And he asked this wonderful Persian phrase, why we have turned to be Kase Dr. as Ash was, we have become a bowl which is warmer than the soup. We are the outsiders. We cannot be more Palestinian than the Palestinians. So we are, on the one side you hear this kind of things, on the other hand there is suppression. And so many intellectuals are in jail for disagreeing with the government or having different ideas. And again, just at the end of the session, you have to be brief, and the best way I can describe it is to tell what a friend of mine told me from another Iranian university. He said that they tell you there is no freedom of expression in Iran. That's not right. We have freedom of expression. What we don't have is freedom after expression. So it's, on the one hand, there is signs of free expression. On the other side, you see how many newspapers and who are in jail and how many people are in jail. So again, another paradox of this Islamic revolution. It is not black, it is not white. It is so many different colors in between, and certainly Iran is somewhere in between. Now, about Ahmadinejad, and I limit myself to two questions about him, is why he's making all these statements and why he's being allowed to make these statements. And although from what Bernard said here, we have to follow if really he is going to defeat the clerics in Iran, because there are such thought that that he may be so powerful that actually he will lead Iran to a new direction, while previous presidents have not been able to do it. So why is making all these statements? Probably, I believe that he believes in what he says. If he says that Israel should be eliminated, rest assured that that's what he thinks should be done. He comes from a background of his family that he's very pious man, very devoted to the poor people. He's very modest. The only thing that he is not modest with is his modesty. You always mention how modest he is. But he is, after all, he's modest. He's a very smart man. I would agree with Professor Hourcade. One example again, it's when he was asked about the way he is dressed. I love the answer that he gave. He said that only this dress does not fit the President of State. He said, it is true, but I'm sure you will agree with me that it fits a slave of his nation. People know Karek Kuchekev Melat. Now, when he speaks about himself as your sweeper of your streets, that was his slogan in the elections. People like it. People like slaves. The presidents is their slaves, and so it's an appeal to the people. The way that Khomeini used to speak to the people, I was closing my eyes when I heard the cassettes of Ayatollah Khomeini 27 years ago. I'm ashamed in front of some of my students to mention, he was convincing me. Because he speaks to your heart, unlike the Shah was speaking to above the head of the people. Compare the way King Hussein was speaking, beautiful Arabic, with Nasser, whose Arabic was not that good. But King Hussein was speaking English, Arabic, like Abba Ibn was speaking English. Both of them could not convince any people neither in Israel or in the Arab world. Nasser's Arabic was not good, but he was speaking straight to the heart of the people. I think that one of the strengths of these clerics is the way that they know how to approach their people. So he has his qualities. His background in the military, whether in Pasdaran or in the army, not in the front, but still being in the army, convincing it with power you can solve problems, probably. Iran is a rich country now. Oil gives him some confidence that he can do it. The United States is stuck in Iraq, and it's another source of confidence for Ahmadinejad. If there is, by the way, one thing that the Iranians are very fearful of, I think, very concerned at least, is that President Bush is in the White House, because they believe that President Bush can do anything which is not rational. So I think that against their strength, there is some concern that still something America can do, but right now it's so much complicated in Iraq. He also has this mysticism, his belief in the guidance of the hidden Imam. You saw what he said in the UN and what he said after coming back from the UN, this aura of light who was above his head and was guiding him. And he has connection with major forces that are gaining more force now that he is president. If you think that Ahmadinejad is radical, extremist, what about Misbah Yazdi? There's people who are somehow behind him. Misbah Yazdi was the man who gave the legitimacy, religious legitimacy, to cut the head of people and use violence against students in open public sermons, and he repeated it. It's not once, it continued. What I can say about Misbah Yazdi, maybe to tell you one word that Soroush said about him. Whenever, there's an interview with Soroush, whenever I hear that Mr. Misbah has made a political proclamations, it disturbs me. He is neither faqih, nor does he know much about Islam or Iran's history. And he goes on and on, say how frightening is whenever he hears that Misbah Yazdi is saying something, he is really scared. And he really scares many people. The point is not that we have now Ahmadinejad, but Ahmadinejad is the result of growing radicalism in Iran, and he encourages further extremism in the future.
It's the Muqallad.
Misbah Yazdi is the Muqallad. Now, regarding the Holocaust, I think he's ignorant. Simply, he doesn't know. I don't think he's cheating or playing games. He doesn't believe that there was Holocaust, and for him it's natural. Now, if you ask me, he didn't plan to stress this issue of Holocaust. He made such statement. He liked the response of the world. He continues with it. Because for him, his statement made him president in Iran. He was a mayor, I don't know how popular he was, but he's the first president in Iran that I know that a year after election he's more popular than 2 days before election. And as you can see, these statements have made him the leader of Iran. They also helped upgrading the status, the image of Iran, at least in the Muslim world in the Middle East. Now the question is why they allow him to make such statements. Well, why not? If I am Khamenei, I would have loved statements by Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad has made Khamenei look good, which is a great success for Khamenei. Compared to Ahmadinejad, Khamenei is not radical. So it is an advantage for the conservative leadership that there is such an extremist making such statements, at least for a while. Then Ahmadinejad has turned the Iranian nuclear issue into a national issue, and the confrontation with the United States into a national. It's not religious, and would you agree? Of course, there are 30%, 25%, but there is a strong national element in it. So this is another thing, another good thing for Iran. Ahmadinejad is putting Iranian positions so extremist, so high, that I think that if Iran wants to get into negotiations with the United States, it can do it now, and they're having a lot of bargain plays. They can retreat a lot from what Ahmadinejad claims, and I think that he stationed Iranian position that extremist that it's, if they want to get into negotiations, they know they can do it now with maneuvering space. Finally, in this regard, I think that by making all these statements against Israel and making statements regarding the Holocaust, Ahmadinejad makes the Iranian nuclear issue appear as a problem of Iran and Israel alone. And I think that the more he speaks about Israel, he tries to convince people. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the result is he wants to tell the Muslim world, the Arab world, this is not your problem. He wants to tell Europe it's not your problem, it's the problem. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand this repeated issue about Israel, elimination Israel, removing Israel to Europe, and so on and so forth. And he doesn't know, but you have connection with him, that when he speaks about moving Israel to Germany, some Israelis are happy. It's the Germans that don't like it. So it's making all these statements. Actually, Ahmadinejad is aiming, or the result is that he makes the Iranian nuclear issue appear as the problem of Israel. Here, I would say that the Israeli politicians' response to it play to the hands of Ahmadinejad. And I wish our politicians could have been more silent on this issue and not make all kinds of statements every day. You don't have to wave with the stick. It's enough that you keep it down. But I'm sure that the Iranians know what are the capabilities of Israel. Now let me conclude by saying 2-3 points. I think that the Islamic Revolution is making the understanding of Iran in a way easier, in many ways more difficult. Now when we look at Iranian history, our view goes through the Islamic Revolution. We go through Islam as a major force. And I think that in many ways we attribute much more influence and power to Islam in fabric of the Iranian state that it's actually had. It's strange. If you go to the library and look how many books have been published about Iran, about Islam in Iraq in the 60s and 70s, very few. So many books after the revolution discussing Islam. Now, modernization was the theme in the 60s and 70s. Islamism in the 80s and 90s. I think there should be a more balanced attitude. And I think what Professor Hourcade was trying to do here is something that I've even written it down. I can show you that I wanted to end my talk with this issue. The Iranian history, Iranian nation has been based on two major pillars. If you want, you call it religion and state. The legacy of Imam Ali and the tradition of King Cyrus the Great, the monarchy in Islam, Persian culture and Shiite religion. These are the two major pillars. Khomeini and the Shah try to disturb this balance. One pushing Iran one way, the other is pushing Iran the other way. I think both of them have failed. And this ship of Iranian state continues to fluctuate until finding an equilibrium between the two extremes. But within these two major elements, there is another element that penetrated recently. Professor Hourcade mentioned it, and Professor Brougeri didn't mention it today, but it's in the books about his Iranian intellectuals and the West. It is the influence of the West. Many people ask if the West should be allowed to come back to come to Iran, into Iran, penetrate Iran. I don't think it's a question. The West is already there. Especially after the Islamic Revolution, this huge storm, this huge tsunami that eliminated so many things. When you have such a huge wave that destroys almost everything, you can better understand what remained, what was solid in Iranian nation, in Iranian history. And when you look from our perspective back to the pre-Islamic, pre-revolutionary era, and see so many elements that are the results of the Iranian encounter with the West, that has remained so solid in Iranian, you call it internationalism, I call it influence of the West, have remained in Iran. Iran is celebrating in few months 100 years to the constitutional revolution. Constitutionalism is the result of the Western influence. The idea came basically directly from the West. And Khomeini came to power, he could have said, we don't need a constitution. There are other countries in the Middle East which don't have constitutions. Saudi Arabia doesn't have a constitution, Israel doesn't have a constitution, basically for the same reason, for religion. But Khomeini said there will be a religion. There will be a constitution. It is a different constitution. There is a new wine in this old jar. But still, the concept of constitutionalism remains. Nationalism that was discussed has remained. Even women's status in Iran. Faegheh spoke about emancipation, another paradox. Twice emancipating Iranian women in different directions. But still, I think that the lively Iranian women organizations, which is in a way the impact of encounter with the West. In modern education, my favorite theme, I remember 130 years ago, how much Iranian clerics have been fighting against the new education. They came to power and they maintained the modern education in Iran. They teach English in their schools. Although they write on their textbook why we need to teach the language of the enemy, but still they teach it. So what I'm trying actually to say that the revolution is not over. There are different schools of thought fighting for power, fighting for influence. Even among the upper-ranking ayatollahs, we see different attitudes. And again, I've been today confused who is deciding, who follows whom. And what we could see from what is discussed in it's not, you don't really need to be a grand ayatollah to influence people. This concept of muqallid and muqallad may have somehow changed, not legally, but practically. And we see Iran really so many different developments that make us question if any individual can be hope. I think that the hope of Iran is a serious social and economic program to eliminate the differences between different strata of society, to improve the socio-economic situation of the poor, and to bring to Iranian people greater freedom. There is an ongoing conflict between two schools of thought, I would claim, and for me the main difference between reformists and conservatives is the stress on social or political justice. It's not either political justice or social justice. I think the Iranians need the bread and freedom. Both of them are important. Ahmadinejad came with this promise that he will take from the rich and give to the poor. He promised to remedy the problems of Iranian society. It is a major challenge. I'm not sure that he can do it, but I can tell you one thing as a student of history. We can really never know how people behave, how people change attitude. We have seen Iran, one thing for sure, that the Iranian people are always active on the scene. And we saw Iranian active in the tobacco movement, constitutional revolution, Mossadegh, Khomeini. Probably the Iranians people would take care of their own problems. The only question for outsiders like us in Israel is whether they will do the change before Iran has nuclear weapon or after Iran has nuclear weapon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for illuminating presentation, clarifying and both presenting the complexity of the Iranian society and the revolution. Now we have about 15 minutes, yes, for questions, and I'm sure the presence of so many distinguished scholars on the floor probably will be, there will be a few questions. Yes, please.
This question relates to two of the presentations. For an Iranian citizen, there's a set of expectations about social goods, particularly as they relate to oil. There is an expectation that if the country has oil, I should have certain things. I should have subsidized bread, I should have good education, I should have good housing. How has oil influenced the Ahmadinejad regime? His first act was almost a failure, appointing this oil minister that he kept appointing them and kept failing. How has he recovered from that, or is there something that I'm missing in regards to the way oil influences the Ahmadinejad regime?
Yeah, you have here or here.
As far as I know, the issue of the Ministry of Oil is over now. The problem is not there. And since you have oil at $70, $75 a barrel, even a donkey may be Ministry of Economy in Iran, So they can take money in the box and distribute it among the people. The main thing is not the price of oil. It is, of course, the price of oil. It is the policy you have of investment. Iran needs $1 billion every year to reach a level 0, in development. And they need at least $30 to $50 billion every year of international investment if they need to reach within 10 years a level 0 to be the starting point for development. And for the time being, they are far from that.
I'd like to take a kind of a different I agree with him, different stand. I think your question is very important. Gold has been referred to, oil as the black gold in Iran. The history of Iranian nationalism is intimately associated with that. The first major nationalist movement in the Middle East was an oil nationalization. And there's always the expectation, the entitlement, that some of the oil revenues should go to our social good that you mentioned. The other connected part, there's no time to go into, part of the reason for autocracy in the Middle East, for dictatorships in much of the Arab world and Iran and so forth, has to do precisely with the fact of oil, the question of rentierism, and how that separates government from society and so forth. So the question is very valid.
I'll make maybe the comment that disturbs me with this question of oil. In 73, 74, the rise of oil price resulted, I would say, in Iran being richer, and 3-4 years later there was Islamic revolution. There is a there is a dark side to oil, growing oil income.
Mrs. Faegheh, could you speak louder?
Where do you get your statistics from? I'm just curious, where did you get the numbers from? Are these the numbers that the Iranian government shared with you?
They don't share anything. You can buy it for $10 in a street corner. No. Now, of course, you have got in Iran, the statistical center of Iran has been, it is good. It is controlled by UN, and Iran is much more, is the same level than France or Germany for the level of the statistics they have. So the census is available. I just use the census, that's all. And
Who takes the census? Is that the Iranian government? Is that the international?
in any case, it's the states of Guatemala, of Venezuela, of France, of Iran, of Israel is taking the census. It is in any country in the world. Why don't in Iran in the time of the king or now, the statistical center of Iran will be ruled and managed by foreigners. I don't understand your question.
I guess what I'm asking is that how reliable are they?
I think that there is the UN Division of Population is controlling all the censuses in the world. And so they have got a level A, B, C, D. And the level of confidence, the level of reliability of the statistics in Iran is not 100% good, it is 90% good. It is the same level as France or Germany, that's all.
So just add to that, sometimes during Iran-Iraq war, the census data showed the system so much worse than some of the government positions were. So in other words, there is more reliability that may meet the eye. But if you come to questions of, for example, Baha'is, that's totally unreliable, of course.
There is no...
I'm just amazed that we know who voted for Ahmadinejad.
No, but, yeah, you take the data on the Ministry of Interior, but it is forbidden to publish such a map in Iran. When they show it to people in Iran, they tell me, what are you doing? All the people of Iran have voted for Ahmadinejad. I told him, no, not exactly all, not everywhere. So using official statistics, you can do a lot of job.
Professor Morin. Could you speak louder, please?
Yes, I really enjoyed the paper, and I got stuck at the conclusion where you are expressing some measure of optimism about jurisprudence catching up with the regular equality crisis. I would agree with you that Sharia tools are there to do so, but I question the possibility of doing so in a state, in a Sharia state that basically essentially does not really embrace equality. And the concept of equality has to precede the concept of general citizenship. So I was wondering what you really base this optimism on.
It may be my wishful thinking, but I think it's beyond that. It's really following the debates within Iran, not just among the intellectuals, Western type intellectuals and so forth, but really among people who mentioned today a great deal. I mean, Kadivar, Shabestari, and so forth and so on, and how this resonates within the society. So the question really is, when does these social movements, these pressures from within, percolate up to the extent that they will in turn constrain the non-equal social order? Now, that could be 5 years. We thought under Khatami, the dam was broken, but it was not. But in the long run, I think, slowly and surely, the only hope in my view, for your very valid point is that this will be evolution from within, where the government has to respond to pressures within society.
Yes, please.
Considering what seems to be a growing power of Ahmadinejad, how do you evaluate his possibility? How far can he afford himself to differ from the views of Ayatollah?
That's for you? In my opinion, I think that Ahmadinejad and these newcomers has come, it is the beginning of the defeat and the retreat of the mullahs in the world. But for the time being, the mullahs have still the power in their hand, that's clear, for the time being. And the guide had done something very intelligent before the last elections. He knew at the beginning that before the election, that if he want to build up a sustainable political Islam in Iran, he has to promote the younger generation. So he promoted Rezai, which was a little bit old, young horses. Ahmadinejad won at the last time, doesn't matter. If it was Rajani, Ghalibaf or Rezai, for himself, he had promoted these four guys. So, of course, he's behind this, he's supporting Ahmadinejad now. But he's not exactly the same. The history, or their own history is different. And so I think that, of course, these two people are working together in the same camp, but they have different histories, they have different projects, and so we cannot exactly say that Ahmadinejad is implementing the orders of the Ayatollah for the guide, and the contrary is not true no more. So we have to know that we have got two different powers, strong powers, closed in the same box, but in two different boxes in the same box. So things are much more sophisticated than they were 2 years ago when there was no newcomers in the political field.
Please, Avner from the Israeli Foreign Ministry. He answered your question? Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Rabir.
Dr. Menashri about the direct negotiation between Iran and the United States when Iran knows that the United States at the Shaitan would a big
Satan.
What you say? What
Well, there's not only someone from the Israeli Foreign Ministry, there's someone from American Foreign Ministry, from embassy, so I should be careful. What I want to say about Iran, America being a great Satan, let me say this, and it's also related to the other question somehow. In Iran, Ahmadinejad still is not the head of the state. And Khamenei is the head of the state. Ahmadinejad still currently, I don't know what will be in future, he's like in Israel deputy prime minister. You mentioned that everyone who runs against Rafsanjani would win. In Israel, they said that even if Shimon Peres runs against himself, he will lose. So maybe it was good. But Ahmadinejad is very, very extremist, very radical. But we have seen in history, Ahmadinejad is the first president that I know in Iran that became more extremist after election than before election. Usually it's different. The head of executive becomes more pragmatic when he is in office. As Arik Sharon used to say, what you see from here, you don't see from there. It's where you sit is where you stand. So Ahmadinejad may change his attitude. And if he will change his attitude, he may be able to do, everyone speaks about Nixon going to China, so this is something that can be done. We know what we know for today. We don't know where will people go, where will politics go, and I think we should be careful in making conclusions for the long run. Final word about Khatami. I think Khatami, many people, at least in this country, don't understand. He was not elected to destroy the revolution. He was elected to save the revolution, and he has done a wonderful job.
Just referring to what you said, David, regarding this article that you mentioned, Pedar Jamee Javanas, I just was thinking about it to relate it to Ahmadinejad. You can read it also as Pedar Jamee Javanas, and whether Ahmadinejad wants to be Pedar Jamee, that's maybe the question. Well, with this remark, I would conclude this session and today, and thank you for coming, and thank you for the participants. Thank you very much.